We're going to make chicken and dressing today. Here's the dish. It's so delicious and it's really easy. Jump on in and make it with me. Hi, I'm Mary Katherine and welcome to my table. I'm so glad you're with me today. This is one of my favorite dishes. It's all carbs, but the holidays are coming up, so you've got to have some dishes like that, right? So we're going to make Crockpot Chicken and Dressing today. Let me show you how. The ingredients are so simple to make dressing. And here in the South, that's what we call it. We call it dressing. We don't typically call it stuffing. We don't usually stuff it inside the turkey. We just make it as a separate side dish. And so that's what we're going to do today. And it's really so easy. And I'm going to show you an even easier way to do it than usual. We're going to make cornbread dressing. So I have baked some cornbread, and you actually want to do this a day or two ahead of time and then let it kind of dry out. So that's what I've done here. You can really use any recipe for cornbread. You can even use one of the box mixes, but just know that this is more of a savory dressing. So if you use a box mix, you may want to read those ingredients and make sure there's not sugar in it, because we don't typically put sugar in our cornbread here in the South. So we're going to use cornbread, and then you can also use just plain sandwich bread as well. And I do that a lot of times. But if you want to make it even easier, we're going to cheat a little bit and use this bag of the herb seasoned classic stuffing. And so I'm going to start by just pouring this into my big bowl like that. And then I'm going to take my cornbread that I've already let dry out, and I'm just going to crumble it in here too. And it doesn't have to be super small pieces. It's all going to get mixed up, and it's going to work just fine. If you used sliced bread instead of the bag of stuffing, you would want about 8 slices of white bread, or you could use the wheat bread as well. But that's about how many pieces of bread you would want, and then this is just one skillet of cornbread that we're adding to it. We're going to add chicken broth to this. And I have got about 20 ounces of chicken broth. That's about the same amount as you would have in 2 cans of chicken broth if you bought chicken broth at the store. So we're just going to pour it directly into it like that. And we're going to add 4 eggs. Now we're going to take 2 cans of cream of chicken soup, and we're going to open them and just add both cans into our bowl. And there's one, and all of that liquid from our chicken broth and the soup and the eggs is just going to help bring everything and bind it together. And now we just need to add our spices to this. I am also going to add onions to it. I like these dried minced onions in this recipe. You can chop your own fresh onions if you want. You would just use about 1 medium onion. But what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to use 2 to 3 tablespoons. We want a good hearty amount. So I'm going to probably do about 3 tablespoons of these onions in here. And then we want to use some salt and pepper. I'm going to use maybe about 1/2 of a teaspoon of pepper, not too much. And then salt to taste. Now, you've already got some salt and some flavor in some of these things in here already. So we're not going to add a whole lot. Maybe 1/2 to a teaspoon of salt will be plenty. This is a large dish, so okay, now the final ingredient we're going to add is sage. This is where you get a lot of your flavor from. And if you really like this flavor, add 1.5 tablespoons. I'm going to add maybe a little over 1 tablespoon, probably not quite 1.5. And for us, I think that's going to be plenty of flavor. We're just going to take our spoon and mix it all together in our bowl. You know, one thing about that cornbread too, you know, I told you make it a day or two ahead of time, but another tip is that sometimes I will make it ahead and freeze it. and then just pull it out and let it thaw and dry out before I want to make this dish. And it works great from the freezer, and it works really well. Like maybe you've made a skillet of cornbread to go with some soup, but you don't quite eat all the cornbread. So if you save it in a Ziploc freezer bag and just put it in your freezer, maybe that happens 2 or 3 times and you've got enough cornbread to make dressing, and you didn't even have to make cornbread special for it. You already had it left over. I have done that before and it works great. So that's another way to make it super easy on yourself with everything you have to do around the holidays. Okay, now you can see the consistency of this. It's still pretty stiff, but it's definitely got the moisture all the way through it now. Now, if you want more liquid, if you like yours a little bit more on the liquidy side, you can add a little more chicken broth. That would be fine. But this is about the consistency that this recipe usually is. Okay, now let's take it over here to the crock pot. I'm going to show you how I put it together. First, I'm just going to spray the crock pot really well, because this does tend to make a crusty edge around the crock pot, around the edge of the crock pot. So I don't want too much of a crusty edge that's going to stick. I want it to release pretty well. So spray it good. Now I'm going to take part of the dressing and go ahead and layer it in here. Now today, I'm actually going to make this chicken and dressing. Now you can just do this dressing by itself as a side dish. And that way, if you did that, you would just go ahead and add all of your dressing to the crock pot now, just the way that we made it in the bowl. But since I'm going to make this chicken and dressing, here's what I'm going to do. I've got some chicken that I cooked. I had some chicken thighs left over, so that's what I'm going to use. I boiled those, and I just let them cook really slow with a little salt and pepper submerged in water. And I let them go for about 2 hours, and then the chicken just pulls right off the bone. That's what I'm using today. But if you've seen any of my other videos where I've used the rotisserie chicken, you know that I love to get that ahead, pull it off, and shred it when I pick those up from Costco. And sometimes I'll just grab a bag of that rotisserie chicken out of the freezer and use it in this dish, and that's perfect too. I just did this today because I had that chicken I needed to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of layer part of it in now, and then I'm going to put a little more dressing so that all the chicken's not just like right together. And I'm going to put the rest of the chicken on top of that, and then come back on top with the rest of our dressing. And you can see that this recipe does fill the crock pot fairly full. So you're going to have a lot of dressing, lots of servings for the whole family that's going to come over for any of your holiday events. Okay, and I'm going to try to make sure that the chicken's fairly well covered so that it stays good and tender and doesn't get dried out. So the last ingredient that we're going to put on top is just some pats of butter. And we're only going to use maybe about half of a stick. So that would just be 4 ounces. And I'm just going to kind of do them like this and spread them around over the top. And that's just going to help it. It's going to give it lots of flavor, but it's also going to help keep it moist as it cooks. You can cook this on high for 2 hours, or you can cook it on low for 4 hours. Either way. So I'm going to set mine on high today. If you do set it on high, you may want to come back and stir it once in the middle. Just know that. I'm going to cook mine on high today and let it go for about 2 hours. All right. I'm going to put my lid on, and we'll come back and check it in a little while. All right, it's been 2 hours, so we're going to check our dressing. I did go back at about the 1 hour mark, and I stirred it. So you can see down there is a little bit of the crusty edge. So if you like that, there will be some. But stirring it in that middle time frame just keeps it from sticking too much to the pan where you can't even get it off. So that's great. You see our chicken throughout. So hopefully with every bite, if you wanted to make chicken and dressing, you'll get a little bit of chicken with every serving of it. But again, if you don't want to add the chicken and just make the dressing, this recipe does really well that way. And I do it often around the holidays when we already have a turkey. We just have this as the side without the chicken in it. And you can see it's still real moist. It hasn't dried out too much. All right, let's give it a taste. That's really good. It reminds me of the dressing that Grandma used to make. But you see, with a couple of the shortcuts that we used, it's really easier to make it. And so I hope you'll remember this recipe. And it frees up that oven space, which I also love. So give this chicken and dressing recipe a try today. I'm so glad you were with me here today at Mary Katherine's table. Let me know, do you call it dressing or do you call it stuffing? Tell me what kind of dressing or stuffing you make. This one is one that we love here in the South, and I hope that you'll give it a try. If you like this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and also make sure you're going to receive the notifications when we put out new videos. We'll also have a link, probably in the first comment, where you can go to our website, and we have printable recipes that we're putting up there for all of the recipes that we've loaded. So be sure to check that out. I'm really glad you were with me today for this episode of Mary Katherine's Table. And remember to go out and find someone today who needs a little bit of kindness and give them some of yours.